Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Miriam Naiman, a senior advisor at Nefesh B'Nefesh. I'm joined today by our specialist, Chana Zweiter, who will be giving this very important webinar on understanding and navigating the special needs system in Israel as you prepare for your Aliyah, perhaps with a child 0 to 21 who has some sort of need that takes them out of a typical classroom or a typical learning setting into something a little bit more specialized. We're also joined by Sailor Axel, a parent who just recently made Aliyah, who will be sharing her story with us as well. We know that it makes it so much real when you can hear from another parent who's experienced some of those concerns and thoughts that you're experiencing right now. I am ready to begin, although I see that some participants are still registering. I want to thank everybody for coming on time. I value everybody's time. And again, today's webinar is being recorded. It will be sent to you within the next 24 to 48 hours. Please make sure to put all of your questions in the Q&A, not in the chat. Along with the recorded webinar that you'll receive will be the links to the different resources discussed in today's webinar. Again, thank you so much. And Chana, please take it away.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you very much, Miriam. Thank you very much, Sailor. And thank you very much, Josh, who's in the background, who's helped us bring this all together. I'm very appreciative of the opportunity to share this time with you. And our goal after the 45 minutes is not to walk you through the process, but rather to make you feel more comfortable and to be able to say at the end, I can make Aliyah too. Okay, and I, as an educator, always find that a logic method of analyzing and evaluating is always the best way. So basically, I'm going to try to help you understand the how, the who's, the what's, and the where's, so that at the end of the day, that the information is organized, that you'll go home with some information. Not that you'll have all the answers, and that anything that I'm going to be helping you understand will be corroborated by Sailor, who's actually gone through this process. So here goes. Okay, the who is, that you are dealing with a team. When you make Aliyah with a child with special needs, and we're talking about a group, as Miriam said, from birth through high school in Israel, and sometimes I'm going to compare it to what you know in the United States. The law is very similar to the law in the United States. The children are eligible for special education until they're 21. And obviously, when we say special education, we know that that's a big sal, it's a big basket, and it covers children who have physical disabilities, children who may have auditory or visual disabilities, children who have learning disabilities, children who might be on the spectrum, the autistic spectrum. And although I may talk generally, the system helps the children in all those categories. And as we know that there's a lot of overlap. Who are the people who are the people on your team? The people you are the most important people. You're the people that helped us start. Your first stop is with Nefesh B'Nefesh. And when you speak to your advisor, when you talk to them about the other members of the family, you'll tell them, I have a child who is in a such and such special education system, like Sailor, when we first met a while ago, who spoke to me about Sam and what system he's in and what system he graduated, what was the process throughout his life. And when you need more help, that's where I come in as the advisor. I have connections with the government agencies, because in a minute we're going to find out what government agencies you need to connect to or need to connect to you in order to get the best services for your children. In each city has a municipal representative, which I'll speak about now, There's a municipal representative, Aliyah representative in Jerusalem. There's one in Ra'anana. I know there's one in Tzfat. In many of the cities, there is a representative, and their goal or their role is to be able to help you through that process. We work together with them, and sometimes we're one step ahead of them, and sometimes we're one step behind them. It's very important to involve them, and they want to be involved, and they're the ones that can make it happen. For example, to save a spot for your child. So that's they're very important. And the Jewish Agency comes when you're applying and you need your visas and you need your approval. They now ask you for to fill out an application where you need to present some of your data and some of the information about your child. And I'll get to that in a few minutes as well. But these are basically all your partners. And although they are in a circle and one arrow points to the other, it's not necessarily sick is around in a circle. I can't remember the English word, but you have to sometimes, you'll be dealing with the Jewish Agency. It doesn't mean that when you finish with Nefesh B'Nefesh and you finish with me, that you jump into the Jewish Agency. It doesn't work that way. Sometimes it's parallel, and we are going to help you navigate the system to find the services and to how to acquire those services. So these are the who. Who are the members of the team that's going to work with you so that you will achieve your goal. Okay, I referred on the previous screen, one of your partners are the government agencies, and they're very, very important. I'm going to skip the sequence, and I'm going to go down to the Ministry of Education, because now we're focusing on education. So the Ministry of Education is the agency that's responsible for your child's education, your child's special education. The ministry works hand in hand with the local government agency, which I should have noted here, and I didn't, but the local government agency that's part of the municipality, which is called an Agaf HaChinuch or whatever, educational authority or board of education, as you might know it in the United States. And they're the people. You come to me, you come to Miriam, you come to one of your advisors at Nefesh B'Nefesh, and you say, I have a child who's going into third grade and is in such and such educational setting in the United States, and I'm looking for a setting here. What happens is that I go to the local, I say to you, as I said to Sailor, where do you want to live? And they said to me at the time, Modi'in or Ra'anana, and we looked for the best settings for Sam in those particular areas. And it's the local person, the local educational authority that's going to be able to help us navigate, and the ministry has to give its approval, or they are supervised by the ministry, then they are Ministry of Education supervisors. And sometimes I know the local supervisor, and I'll go directly to the supervisor in Jerusalem, for example, straight to Yael Schwartz and say, look, I have a child who's 12 years old, and she's very high on the spectrum, very, very, very intelligent. Where do we begin? So sometimes I start with the ministry and sometimes with the local municipality, but either way, they are two partners in the educational system. You will need Ministry of Health, whether you're coming with a child with special needs or not. You need to have, you need your own Kupat Cholim, which is your own health server for all your family. If your child has particular needs, let's say your child has physical needs or allergies or something, before you sign up, try to navigate that also. We'll try to help you find that too. I need a good allergist. I need a good psychiatrist. So before you sign up to any of the Kupot Cholim, it's important to navigate that. The Ministry of Welfare is important for children who need other services like after school services or other kind of enrichment services, etc. And we talk, we'll get to these a little bit later on, is the national insurance, which kind of complements in the sense of with an E, to adds to what the others provide and gives you extra services. We'll get to that and how to access them in a minute, but these are your partners. These are the government agencies that you will need, and some will need more, and some will need less, different ones. Okay, since our focus, this is the what. Okay, what are we looking for? This is the what. What are we looking for? Well, you came to us and you're looking for a special education service. And as we know, the good news is that there are great services in the United States. And let's say we'll talk to you about that. We don't sugarcoat everything. There are some not such good services, but I, as the founder of Yachad and somebody who has a lot of experience and connections in special education in the United States, could say there are a lot of not so great special education settings in the United States as well. But
Hannah, I just want to remind you that we have participants today from Canada, from the UK, actually worldwide.
Okay, I'm going to remind myself. Thank you, and you can keep reminding me. And if I refer to other settings, it's to help you feel connected. Okay. First, I want to say that one of the advantages of the Israeli system, the Israeli public school system, even, is that we have religious and secular tracks I know in the United States, I think it's true in Canada as well, in North America, throughout North America, there is a separation of religion and state, which means that there isn't a variety of special education settings within the Jewish sector, because they have to serve, it's private, they have to fund a lot of it themselves, and therefore it's very expensive to have one program for kids who are high on the spectrum, and one for kids who have a language disorder, and one for kids who have maybe a physical disorder. So a lot of times they're all in one program. In Israel, because it's a public school system, it is divided between religious and secular, and those are the broad terms. Within the religious sector, there's also a spectrum of different degrees of quote unquote religiosity, or I prefer to say expressions of religion. Okay, there's a Tali system, which is a public school system that has added Jewish history and Judaism to it, but it's not in the religious system. There's the regular Mamad, which is a regular religious system. There's a Mamad Torani, which is a little bit more, I like to say it's a different expression. I don't like to say it's more religious. I feel it's a different expression of Judaism. Anyway, so the good news is that in all these settings, because it should be in sync with who you are, and just like you choose schools for your other children accordingly, that's how you're going to choose a school, special education settings. And like in the United States, and again, I think in North America and Canada as well, we have different degrees of special education. Your child might need a self-contained school. Your child might need, and this, when I say a school, I mean from early childhood through high school, where special education schools for children with learning disabilities, for children with developmental disabilities, for children, and the different degrees. There are schools for children who are profoundly developmentally disabled, children who are high functioning, and so there are different schools. And again, this is true of nursery and kindergarten as well, elementary school, junior high school, and above. Okay, if your child is, let's say, has been in a parallel class today in the United States or North America, wherever it is, they're in a parallel class, or maybe your child has been in a regular class today in wherever, let's say Miami Beach, and is now moving into a new system, a new language, your child might do better in what we call a Kitam Akademet, which is a parallel special education school in a quote unquote regular school, meaning that you choose Beit Sefer Moriah for your other children, and they have a Kitam Academic, they have a parallel classroom there. The advantage of the parallel classroom is your child is going to have 10, maximum 10 children with at least 2 aides. And you can have the advantage of, because your children is now your child is now transitioning as well from languages, which is not a minor. So the adjustment in terms of physical and emotional adjustment and the adjustment to the change is a big consideration. And so, the adjustment to a new language will demand more support. Now, I, as the director and founder of Yachad, I live inclusion, but I would say, and I believe in the least restricted environment, but I would say that it's to your child's advantage to be able to understand that these are public schools. So we're talking about classes that are 35, could be 35. The mandate is not to usually separate the class until you get up to 40. A lot of schools do it anyway, and they support it privately, but your kid, if your child is going to go into a regular classroom, there's going to be 30 somewhat kids in that classroom. And you need to ask yourself, in the where and the what, is this the right place for my child? That will she make that adjustment with so many kids without the support? So again, I advise usually for a more restricted environment at the very beginning. And the good news is that we are not, there's no stigma that goes with the child. And the agencies, I have to say, that we referred to before, the Ministry of Education and the local educational authority, are very sensitive to moving your child and want the same thing as you. And so they're very sensitive to helping you move the child into a least restrictive environment as the child adjusts to the changes. And the Kitam Academic is there's also special kitot, special classes for children with learning disabilities. They're very specialized. There are classes for children who are on the spectrum. They try not to mix the kids. They try to be as specialized as possible, which is also an advantage to your child. When a child does go into a regular class, the child either can have a mora metakenet, which means your child is now moved and starts out included in a regular classroom. Either the child can get some resources with the mora metakenet, a resource room teacher who may take the child out for different support, or sayat. A child is eligible. There's a certain number of hours that your child might be eligible for, where a sayat is an assistant, or what we know here, we call it a shadow. And that shadow could be in the classroom in a quote unquote regular classroom, that regular classroom with 30 odd kids. And that child can be, when the child is ready for that, the child can move into that class with an assistant. All of these, okay, all the wheres and the what, we're looking towards a special education system. Where is which one is best for my child? We need a process to be able to get to it, okay?
Hannah?
Yeah.
I think that slide was just fantastic to give people a good foundation of the different types of classes of services, no pun intended. Could you, as an example, discuss how a child with ADHD or someone on the spectrum, just very briefly, how, would they go to a Kitam Academic, I'm being asked here. Just if you could give a slight overview without knowing too much information. People are asking about services and how does it work?
Right. So
specifically to ADHD and being on the spectrum.
Okay. So I was going to get to that a little bit later, but
okay, that's fine.
Okay, let me go ahead because I think I'm going to answer it as we go along. But if we don't, remind me again, Miriam. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. I just had a special birthday. Okay. Here we go. Before I spoke about another service, okay, another team member, which is the Kupat Cholim, and within the Kupat Cholim, within the health health sphere. First of all, this is true. All of these are names of the major Kupot Cholim here in Israel: Muchedet, Maccabi, Klalit, and Leumit. Some areas, geographic areas, have more services than one and have less. Before you register, make sure that it's going to answer all your needs. Not only a child who has special needs, all your needs. You come and you have allergies, you come and you have, I don't know, a heart condition, whatever it is. I need a cardiologist, I need this. Explore that. Do your homework with that. And if you want, we can help you do that as well, but that's very important. But in terms of your child, so you need Briut Klalit, which means you're looking for general health. That's for the whole family. The other thing is you might need each of the Kupot Cholim, each of the health services have a division called Hitpatchut Hayeled, which is child development. You may need that because they're going to help you with evaluations and therapies. Depending on what special education class your child is going to go will determine how many therapies and what the extent of the therapies that they will give you, and they will give you different kinds of support. If your child has mental health issues, and that's true of yourself as well. If another family member, if your child has mental health issues, then Briut HaNefesh is an arm of the Kupat Cholim as well. You need to apply to it, but they will provide a psychiatrist, they will provide a social worker, they will help you access some of the other services that you need for your child. And this is particularly significant as your children get older and you need to, when you'll get to a point where you're going to have to transition out of the education sphere into the other services, Revacha or Briut HaNefesh, or that Pituach Chomi, those are very important. That's very important. Okay, and this is where I think I'm going to answer that question, Miriam, and whoever asked the question, if the question is still pertinent, please feel free to jump in. Okay, so now we know, we talked a little bit about the who, we talked a little bit about the what and the where, and now we need to say the how. Okay, I have all these, these partners, now what do I do, or how does it work? So after you've spoken, you've connected to Nefesh B'Nefesh, and they have connected to me, it starts with a discussion. Okay, this child, you're coming on Aliyah with a child with ADHD, you'll speak to Miriam or one of the other advisors at Nefesh B'Nefesh, and then they'll refer them to me. We'd like to know, and one of the things that I ask when I send you some forms or some documents is a profile. Write in your own words. Tell me a little bit about your child in your own words. Who he is, who she is, besides the pertinent birthdays, et cetera, what is going on in his life before where he is now, right, Sarah? I see you shaking your head, okay? And then what you need is, okay, you have this child with ADHD. You are a very important source of information. The government, we all need the evaluations. They're critical, okay? And the evaluations have to be 6 months to 1 year old. Skewed it toward the 6 months. The newer, the better, and particularly for younger children. Okay, so that's one point that I have to make. What I like to see is when you come to me, I'd like to say to you, send me even an older evaluation. The most recent, I don't care if it's a year or a year and a half old, it gives me added information about the profile of your child. But to go to apply to the Jewish agency, go back to that first slide, who are the members on your team, or to the local municipality, or to the Misad Chinuch, Ministry of Education, you need an updated evaluation. What evaluations? You need a psychological, it could be a neuropsychological, but it has to be a complete battery, not a short letter that a psychologist will write, but it has to be a complete evaluation, including IQ, including behavior, including executive functioning, including all the things that every psychologist knows to answer. And but I am happy if you want to have a list I have a list for, adults, which is not pertinent at this particular point to you, but I do have a list of the kinds of testing that we're looking for that the psychologist should do. We need a pedagogical. What that means is that we need a report from your child's school, from the teacher who's been working with Sam this whole year, who worked with Sam before, like how did he come in this year? Where is he? What is her or his perception of what this child needs? And we need a medical. A medical we'll need anyway, and you're going to need a general medical for the Jewish agency. But if your child is on the spectrum or has an ADHD, we need to have a psychiatric. And that is a psychiatric report from a doctor who has been taking care of your child, who will describe his or her profile, who she is, plus a very, very clear diagnosis. I personally am not a diagnosis person. In other words, but I'm telling you, you need those clear diagnoses to get the placement in Israel. In other words, let's say your child is on the spectrum, okay? If your child is on the spectrum, both the psychologist, the psychological, and the medical has to say that this is the diagnosis. And there are particular diagnoses, there's, categories that psychologists do use and psychiatrists do use, but it has to be very clear diagnosis. Without these two, a child can't be placed in a special education for children on the autistic spectrum. But it's clear they ask it for the other children that child with ADHD as well. After that, I would like to interview, sometimes on the Zoom. I've done that a few times. I've sat with the child on Zoom, if possible. Obviously, if the child is too young, it's not pertinent, but I like to get to know the child, because sometimes the papers say, are just papers, and it's better for me to be able to see the child. Interview means interview with you as well. And often, not all the time, but your team, the educational team will say, maybe we can have a meeting. Maybe we have a Zoom meeting with your child. We just did it with a family who's coming in Aliyah from Boston, and they interviewed the child on Zoom. Okay, 1 second.
While you're drinking, Chana, do the evaluations need to be translated into Hebrew before?
Right, yeah, okay, good. Thanks for reminding me. So the evaluations, the Jewish agency doesn't require you to translate it. They're fine if you send them in English, but they need to be translated here. They need to be translated in Hebrew. Thanks for reminding me. And I have a couple of translators that I use that have been very well received by the government agencies in the placement committee meeting. So we make an agreement. Okay, I'm ready. And then I make a shit up. I can connect you with the translator. You're responsible to pay her or him directly. Okay, so thank you for reminding me. And then there's the placement committee meeting. Okay, and again, we're talking about education. So this child with ADHD or this child who's somewhere on the spectrum, there's a placement committee meeting. And you've done that in the United States to be able to acquire, to determine eligibility for benefits. And then what are those benefits? So the first step of that placement committee is eligibility for benefits. And on that committee sits a parent representative. There's a special education parents committee in each locale. So there's that person. There's a supervisor or assistant supervisor or staff person of the Ministry of Education. And there's at least one representative from the local special education committee. That's that municipal committee that I spoke about before. And they come on the committee, and I talked about you being a very important player. You're a very important player. And I want to tell you that I've sat on many, all over the country and over many years since I made Aliyah, which will be 30 years soon, and all over the country. And I have to say that the placement committees are very professional, very personal, and I've never been to a meeting where they have not looked at the best interest of the child, and they listen to what you have to say. They may say, I don't agree with you 100%. They may say, Hannah, I don't agree with you 100%, but they work together as a team. And if a parent like Sailor will say, I was thinking of X for Sam, and she'll tell you herself soon, then they are very, very good listeners. In the end of the day, they help. The first meeting is to declare eligibility, and then you get a letter saying you're eligible, your child is eligible for special education, and we suggest such and such placement, and then the local the local professionals in the municipality, in the city board of education are going to look for the best place, and you're going to be working with them, and I'm going to be working, but you're a major player now. You're going to go and you're going to observe the program here, and you're going to observe the class here, and you're going to be able to access it. Understand, getting back to the who's on your team, we talked about the municipal Aliyah person. He will help direct traffic. She doesn't come on this meeting, but let's say you're in the United States or in Canada, and I know a lot of the Aliyot have been stalled for all the bureaucratic and corona reasons, et cetera. And I have been able to, in certain municipalities like Jerusalem, they've approved my getting Yipui Koch, my getting power of attorney and representing the family, representing you. But I represent you, I don't represent me. We discuss it, I will get to that committee and I will represent you. So some of the middies are now being done on Zoom anyway. Just as a point of information, the placement committee meetings, the Va'adot HaSamot, that's the name, Va'adah HaSamah is a Hebrew word for them, are done in Israel. They take place in Israel, starting every year. It's a little bit earlier, usually from November, December, and they end in May. Because of Corona, they've slept on. But if you come on Aliyah, I always say to parents, this is my advice. If you can come on Aliyah earlier, if you can come on Aliyah at the end of May or beginning of June, depending on where you live and when school is over, get here. Because the earlier you come, the more possibilities there are. In other words, there are more openings in that class, in the class of your choice or our choice. But either way, let's say you can't come for all the reasons. You're coming as a family, you have family needs, and you can't come till the end of August. You are eligible for an immediate Va'adat HaSamah. You are eligible for a very an immediate placement committee meeting. A warning. Immediate if the people in the Board of Education and the ministry are on vacation or people here are not available. Some places it could take a while. Most places, again, municipalities, this is true in Ranana, this is true in Jerusalem, where we've been able to get a Va'adat HaSamah quickly. Okay, so you are eligible for a placement committee meeting, even if it's not within the regular calendar year of the placement committee meetings. Okay.
Hannah?
Sure.
Can you recap, once a person has a date for their Va'adat HaSamah,
right,
what can they expect in terms of a timeline? They've had their meeting, right, and how long can they expect to hear? Because we know that, perhaps you can differentiate exactly what happens at the Va'adat HaSamah, what a person will walk away with, and what could be the second part to complete the process.
Okay, so that's a great question. So this is usually what happens after the Va'adat HaSamah is that they begin to find the different places, appropriate places. One of the advantages of our working together is that we do that homework before. We try to do as much of that homework before. And because I know some of the schools, et cetera, we try to make those connections before. When we've made that connection before, Miriam and all of our audience, our listeners, when we've made that connection before, so we can already come to the Va'adat HaSamah, even though the first one is to be able to determine eligibility, which is done immediately. Usually they'll even tell you at the meeting that they've determined eligibility, and you'll get a letter in a few days, okay? You'll get a letter in a few days saying your child is eligible, okay, for Kitat Tiksharet or Kitat Makademet or a special education school. So that is usually immediate. If we come and say, you know what, we've already observed, and we know, I've spoken to the mefakachat, the supervisor, and we know that they're opening a class in, this is a true story, they're opening a class in a school, Evelina, for children, girls on the spectrum, junior high school, and we've already checked it out, and we think that that's helpful. My experience is they like that. They're appreciative that you've done your homework. They've always said thank you to us. Of course, we can't say this is the place, but we can recommend it. And we get those answers quite quickly. I have to say, there was a little boy who came, and they didn't even come on Aliyah. The father was relocated to work in Israel professionally. I was able to work out with the supervisor to visit the school even before the Vadat HaSama. The parents thought it was perfect school for the child. At the Vadat HaSama, which was 2 days after they moved to Jerusalem, at the Vadat HaSama, they determined the child's eligibility for a special self-contained special education class. We're talking about a child who has severe disabilities, and they determined he was on a school bus in 3 days. This Vadat HaSama, I think, happened Wednesday or Thursday. By Sunday, he was in school, which was so that, it depends on how ready we are. Now, just a word to the wise, which I mentioned before, we need to, when we do our homework, be very sensitive to the local municipal Aliyah person, because sometimes they feel like we're up, we're doing their job, and we need to bring them in as our partners, and they can be very helpful partners. For example, if your Aliyah has been detained, they can get in there and try to save that spot in special education, even if it's not, you haven't gotten that, you haven't had that, that's enough. Those are things that I can't do. They're in the government, okay?
And what is the difference between a Vadat HaSama and a Vadat Zakaut Va'afion?
The Vadat HaSama is the one that you need to go to for the special education. The Vada of Ifyun is more for what we'll need afterwards, If your child comes, sometimes you need a residence right away, or sometimes, a Vadat HaSama is a Vadat Shiluv. In other words, if your child has to go into, but a Vadat Ifyun has to do more with Misrad Revacha. That's been my experience. It has to do with more of the stuff that's not educational, not as an educational process. But if you need a Masada, in other words, let's say your child is in like this little boy that just made Aliyah, went straight into a school in Jerusalem. The school, the Ministry of Education is responsible for his day and taking care of him, his services up until, let's say, 1 o'clock, or let's say whatever. But he's in school till 5. So the Misrad Revacha is responsible for his services, whatever recreation, whatever services he gets in the afternoon. And that is the Vadat Ifyun, okay? Let's say you come with a child, even though if your child, most younger children don't come on, don't need residence, but sometimes they do, then Misrad Revacha is responsible for that. So in addition to the education, we need to be able to go to Misrad Revacha, and that is done by district. If you live in a certain part of Jerusalem, for example, you go to the southern office. If you live in another part, you go into the northern office, and they assess what their services are, whether for recreation or residence, and they are also responsible for early intervention. There are wonderful early intervention programs. If you come with a child, a baby, then and they're very specialized. There's early intervention for children who have been, they know are on the spectrum. There's early intervention for children who are physically disabled, and there's early intervention for children who are developmentally disabled, i.e. retarded. So there are early interventions, and Mishrad Revacha is responsible until the child is of age 3. So we need to be able to find, access it through Mishrad Revacha. Bitoach Leumi is national insurance, and they provide for older people, over 21, they provide stipends, based on employability and earnability. But when your child is younger, there may be things like transportation or other needs that your child is eligible, and you should know that, or physical needs, accessible, different aviarium equipment that help your home to be accessible. Now, there are most people, and I'm saying it that way because Miriam was very kind to remind me this morning, not to forget the people that need to have the immediate response. But most people need to wait for a year. They want to make sure that you're living here, that you have your other services, and then you can apply to Bitoach Leumi. But there is such a thing as Sharam, and Sharam is if you come on Aliyah with a child who is and a parent just asked me about this recently, which has severe physical disabilities or any kinds of disabilities that need to be answered immediately. You can't wait for a year for that. Then there's an application. There is a Sharam Nechut, and those you can access the services or the equipment that you need. You can access it within or apply within 90 days. For other people, it's 1 year, but it's interesting because I know places that in different municipalities or different areas that accept the applications even earlier, some of them just reject it right away and say, well, you're not living here long enough. So you need to wait.
Just want to add one thing. Our time is running out, and we want to get to Sailor's story. When one has a child who is eligible for services from the national insurance, from Bitoach Leumi, who is eligible for disability, as you mentioned, there's a stipend. And then there's other discounts such as income tax and certain municipal services. So it doesn't stop just there, but when it comes to a child and placement in early intervention, elementary school, high school, just because you may not be able to apply to Bitoach Leumi for 9 months up to a year, it doesn't stop you from the right placement that you may need for your child for educational services. I just wanted that to be clear.
Thanks. That's why we're a team. That's why I said we're a team, because we really help each other. We complement each other. Thanks, Miriam. Okay. And just the last thing is that I think of the what, like another thing that you need, no matter who you are, and this speaks to you as well, the parent, speaks to the children of all levels. You need to start teaching or use Hebrew as much as possible. If you can use Hebrew at your table, a dinner table, Shabbat table, whatever it is, whenever it is, set aside a time to use it. There are also different games, and depending on the functioning level, who your child is, the age level, et cetera, et cetera. There are different games online. I mentioned I just found a couple of them that might be interesting, but you can go to your local bookstore. You can, Google it, the local bookstore. There are a lot of games. There are all kinds of games, and it's very, very critical. Whether you come speaking Hebrew or not, it's very important to be able to learn the tone and to be comfortable with it when you come. It's not comfortable to come to a place where you can't speak the language. Sailor, I know that sometimes you say, I know I'm in the meetings, and it's not comfortable. And your child, it's going to help your child adjust And that's why, again, I'm saying that the learning Hebrew is so critical that I really believe that a more restricted environment that's going to provide the Hebrew as well, and the comfort level in the Hebrew is really quite critical. But you start now, start when you get off this webinar today, go check it out and start speaking Hebrew, even words here and there. There's got to be a familiarity, etc. And we should have advertised this because she is a great asset to this presentation. I thought it would be helpful, Miriam, and I thought it'd be helpful to hear from a parent who went through the process. And I worked with the Axel family for a year and a half or so. They was going to make Aliyah, and they changed it. And then, how did it work for you, Sailor, as a parent? And take it away.
So first, we could not have done it without Hannah. She was a gift from above. There's no question. What happened was we were considering it, and then we did a pilot trip, and we left saying we can do it, we cannot. And our son at the time is in a mainstream class, and he had been diagnosed as very high functioning on the spectrum with ADHD. So whoever was the person with that question, if you want to contact me later, I can tell you more detail about my experiences. And he was in first grade, and then we went on our pilot trip. First grade.
I think it was in first at the time. It doesn't matter so much.
It doesn't matter, but we left saying, he's doing so well right now. He's on an upward trajectory. We're so happy with the way things are working out. And Hannah actually said to us, now is not the time. She said, you are going to have a time where your child, and this is of any child with a special need, will plateau. And that's a good time to come, because then they can start afresh. But if your son is on a trajectory up right now and he's succeeding, don't come, because you're just going to throw off everything for him. So we shelved it, and Corona hit, and everything we had progressed just absolutely went the wrong direction. He was the worst candidate for Zoom classes, and we said, well, it's terrible here now. Why not just come? Why not just go? And we did it. And so we worked with Hannah, and I will put a very, very big preface out there that my husband is 100% fluent in read, write, speak, everything. I have no Hebrew skills whatsoever. And so I know that my husband, who is not the education person, has done so much more than he's ever had to do before for education and doctors and medical stuff, and everything that was always kind of my responsibility for our kids is now his. So if you have a Hebrew speaking spouse, that I don't know how you do it without it. But I know people do it all the time. I will say that, so we were pretty concerned about, originally Hannah said, I really think he'll do well in a, how do you say it? Kitat Shoret?
Kitat Tikshoret. Kitat Tikshoret, yeah.
So it was a small class of other children who were on the spectrum, and they could not guarantee us that the kids in the spectrum class would be high, low, that it was something that we were really concerned about, because he's incredibly high functioning, and we did not want him in a class of children that would not benefit from his presence, but he would also not benefit from their presence. And so I mean, because there's also schools for children on the spectrum, but that was not where he would need to be either. So he was mainstreamed in Texas. That's where we're from. And because of Corona, one of the things that, I don't know where you guys are from, but where we were from in Texas, in Dallas, there was absolutely no guarantee that you were going back to school. And this was one of the most magical things, was that it didn't matter. Our kids were going to school, special education kids. And I think like stay at school, boarding type children were guaranteed to stay at school, and they didn't have to do Zoom classes. They didn't have to go home. So my son, during the time when even my gone children were home, he went to school every single day, and his Hebrew has just almost fluent now. And he started with a little bit, but not, I mean, not an amazing amount. And he's almost completely fluent now. He is in a school where there's no English spoken. And we are actually, now he has done so well. He's so comfortable in his environment. He's so happy. He's made friends. The kids in his class are very similar to him. The parents are unbelievable. The resources, the teacher, I thought the teachers that we had in our, upper middle class suburban district were unbelievable. And the teachers, and even in the GONs where my neurotypical children go, have just been blown me away at how professional. This is the most professional special education teacher I've ever met in my life. She is the most dedicated. I will preface that she's from Russia, and so English is like her fourth language. And so my husband has the most communication with her, which is a little different for me. But she goes out of her way to put Google Translate for every single message because she wants me to be a part of the conversation. She doesn't want me apart, like outside. She wants me as inside as she can possibly enable it. The meetings that we had with Hannah when we were first getting through this process, the paperwork is unbelievable. It is so, every time I thought Hannah sent us an email saying, this is what you need, I would get back to her with it. And then I thought I was golden. And then Hannah would say, oh, by the way, now that you've gotten this, I didn't want to overwhelm you. Now you need this one. And so every single thing took a very long time. I will say Corona sped it up. And in most places, I think it slows things down. In Israel, they seem to do an amazing job with the online, everything. I mean, the doctors, everything is just so streamlined here. And it's amazing. We were concerned about medication for my son because the medication he was on there is not even available in Israel. We found the most unbelievable psychiatrist, and she for pediatrics, and she has done absolutely everything. She called on her off hours to make sure she could call during our Dallas-based psychiatrist to make sure they could communicate so that she could know how to treat him. I mean, every single professional that we've come across in the education system and medical system has just blown me away. I mean, I thought we had it good where we were from, and this is just above and beyond. The services he receives, he would have never gotten in Dallas, not because he doesn't need or deserve them, just because they put such a focus and such a priority on special education children here that I had no clue. And as much as Hannah would tell us, I had no way of understanding it. We have, because a lot of it dedicated to the teacher that he is now, we have decided to mainstream him for next year with I don't know the Hebrew word, but it's called a special education basket. So he's given a basket of tools, which include services, which include for him a sayat, or what I call the para, but they don't use that word here at all. And a sayat. So he's given the opportunity to have someone with him in the mainstream classroom to help him adjust. And he's so excited. And the letter that the city sent us approving his transfer actually wrote on there, congratulations. We are so proud of the success that he has shown. So they don't want you to feel like you're doing something beyond them. That their job is to make you so proud and comfortable. And they're unbelievable.
Sailor, how did you find that psychiatrist?
That was through, so we live in Renana and Maccabi, and also clearly I speak no Hebrew. So Maccabi seemed to be the best fit for us for those reasons. The amount of English speaking professionals is important to me. And they seem to that. And so we were able to connect with someone. Our pediatrician gave us the name of a couple of people. And she actually, because of our situation with the medicine and the type of controlled substance that he was taking was only allowed to be prescribed 90 days at a time in the States. We came with 3 months of medication. And when we told her our situation, she pushed us from, a 9 months away. She put us in 2 weeks later, and we went, and she's on our speed dial. She's the type of person that just wants to be accessible. She's the only professional medical person we've encountered that doesn't have 100% English. But she does absolutely everything she can to make it so that she understands. And again, my husband has no issues with the Hebrew, but she wants me a part of the conversation. And she took the time to call the doctor that we had in Dallas. On her at this point, he was working and she was off, because every doctor we've met has just been so dedicated to. They care here. They really care. And
last question, I'm going to ask Josh Sussman, who's working the vaccine, for 30 seconds overtime. But were you able to see the class before you put your son into the class with his placement? Somebody has asked, how did you know? I'm sorry that I can't give you a long time to answer.
No, it's okay. I didn't know, and that was not anyone else's fault besides Corona. From everything I understood, had it not been during Corona and the height of Corona, because our Aliyah was the day after Yom Kippur 2020, so there was a full lockdown. It wasn't even a small they were on full lockdown. So no, I didn't, and that was a huge leap of faith, and that's all because of Hannah. I don't think my husband and I would have ever thought, our son was mainstreamed in Dallas, so it was because of Hannah that my son got to go to school every single day, and it was because of Hannah that we put our faith in her, and she's amazing. So
first of all, that's why I invited you, Sarah, because I knew you were going to say all these wonderful things. But I want to tell you, Sarah, the truth is that I have to say, being part of the Vadat Hasama, the placement committee meetings, I found that the people on the educators on the municipal level and the supervisor of the Board of Education, the Ministry of Education, were very minded and very attentive to what your needs were.
unbelievable.
And they came even after he started and said, we'll give it a time. And they came to observe. And so I have to say that I might have navigated for you, but we really invited the other partners to be partners and to be team players. And that was critical. That was critical.
And they have absolutely been a part of even now that we're mainstreaming. They are still connected to us, and they are still asking us, what can we do? How can we help? And they're amazing, really.
Celia, thank you so much for joining us. Hannah, do you want to just put your last slide up? People can quickly jot down your contact information. As mentioned in the beginning, today's event was recorded, and I had said that it would be sent to you within the next 24 hours, but Josh Sussman just told me he'll be traveling tomorrow, so it may take a little bit longer, but you will receive it. You'll receive it with some contact information and some links to important references that were made today. And I thank you all for joining us. Thank you so much, and have a great day.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Sailor. Thank you, Miriam.
Thanks.